Okay, good afternoon. My name is Councillor Charlie McCoubry and I am the leader of the council. I can confirm that the committee officers conducted a sound check before the start of the hearing, so I will assume that everyone can hear me. Can I welcome everyone to today's meeting, where we're all attending remotely. In addition to cabinet members, we also have non-cabinet members and officers joining us to assist with our discussions. For those viewing the live stream recording, cabinet members are identified with an asterisk next to their name. The meeting will be recorded and live streamed, other than exempt items, and will be available for viewing after the meeting. Should the live streaming fail, the meeting will continue and a recording will be available through the council's website following the conclusion of the meeting. Can I remind members that translation facilities are available and to choose your language of choice. If you wish to speak, please use the raise hand function. You can also use the chat facility, but please note that I may not be able to monitor the chat facility during the meeting. All microphones will be muted. If you've indicated your intention to speak, you'll be invited to turn your microphone on. If you must leave your device for any reason, can you please ensure that you are muted and that you turn off your video off? Can I remind members that as there are exempt items on the agenda today, then you should be the only person able to hear any confidential and exempt items being disclosed. Thank you. We'll just get my agenda up. And without any further ado, if we can move on to agenda item 1, which is apologies for absence, Felicia.
I've had an apology from Jane Richardson, Strategic Director of Economy in Place. Thank you.
Okay, so no other apologies to record. So agenda item 2, Declaration of Interest, Code of Local Government. Members are reminded they must declare the existence and nature of their declared personal interest. Councillor Cheryl, you've got your hand raised.
Yes, thank you very much, Leader. If there is an in-depth discussion regarding direct payments in social care, I would like to be removed from this as I have an interest, a member of my family. Thank you very much.
Okay, Cheryl, thanks for making us aware of that. Any other members would like to declare? No, fantastic. So agenda item 3 is urgent matters. I'm not aware of any. You and Shan? No urgent matters. Fantastic.
No.
Oh, thanks. Agenda item 4 is minutes of the cabinet. To approve and sign as a correct record the minutes of the previous meeting. So they're available, members, on pages 4 to 11. And so unless there's any matters arising, can I ask somebody to propose them as a true record? Councillor Gregg and Councillor Mark, I'll get you down to second them. So can all members show they're happy with the minutes, please? Thank you ever so much. So agenda item 5 is a matter referred to the Cabinet with the Finance and Resources Overview and Scrutiny Member for consideration. So that's on pages 12 to 13. Members will remember that the committee wanted us to set up a working group to look into how the CJCs will operate. As I understand it, it's just for Cabinet to approve that in principle, and then it will go back to committees for them to invite members and decide the makeup of the group. Is that right, Rain? You're nodding your head there. Okay. So members, Chris, would you like to come in?
Yes, I'd like to support this, Leader, definitely. I think it should be set up. So I'd like to propose that we go with the recommendation from scrutiny. Okay,
and Councillor Gregg, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I'll second the proposal. I think obviously there's quite a bit of concern around these, so the quicker we can get this set up and looking into the detail of how it's going to work, the better, I think.
Okay, members, I would certainly concur with that, having attended 2 meetings so far. It's nice to have that democratic oversight and governance. So we've had a proposer and a seconder. Could members please show they're in favour of that going back to committees for approval? Fantastic, thank you. So agenda item 6 is to review the Cabinet Forward Working Programme. That's on 14 to 49. Again, are there any issues members would like to raise or discuss? No, and if not, could we have a proposer for that, please? Do we accept it? Gromway and seconder, Councillor Bryan. Again, can all members show in favour that they're happy with that? Fantastic. We're up to agenda item 7, which is the announcements by the leaders. You will notice that my throat is struggling a little bit, and we do have a fairly lengthy agenda, so I'm going to, in the interest of brevity and the interest of me being legible is not the word, being able to be understood, I will have no further notices to make. Yuan, would you any announcements you'd like to make?
Yes, thanks, Leader. Just one thing I have written to members to advise, but it's worth mentioning here. As you're aware, our head of Children's, Family and Safeguarding, Kate Denport, is off ill and is like to be off poorly for quite considerable time. Unfortunately, we wish her her well and a speedy recovery. But in the meantime, the Senior Employment Committee met on the 27th of January and have appointed Tesney Hadwin as a temporary head of service into that role. Tesney is our highly experienced service manager for vulnerable people, and we will rally round and support her in picking up the cudgels of that important role. I'd like to thank Diana Burns, who worked tirelessly to bring that application process, an appointment process, to fruition alongside Jenny Williams, and also to the Senior Employment Committee, who met at short notice and very diligently made that important appointment for us. So thank you, Leader.
Yeah, thanks you. And I'm sure on behalf of members, they'd like me to offer our best wishes to Kate and hope she's on the mend soon. I think once again, for me, interviewing the 3 members of staff who were kind enough to put themselves forward, we're really lucky with some excellent officers, some really dedicated and highly qualified and professional individuals. So it stand us in good stead moving forward. And congratulations to Tesney on the role. Okay, so we'll move on to the meat of the agenda, I guess. Item number 9, which sits in the finance, revenue and benefits portfolio. The first part of that is our anti-tax evasion policy, and it's on pages 50 to 75. So over to Councillor Bryan.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. This is probably the easier report of the day. The anti-tax evasion policy, it sets out the procedures to be followed to enable the council to comply with its legal obligations under the Criminal Finance Act of 2017. The policy is being introduced following advice from our tax consultants that as a relevant body under the Act, the council would be criminally liable where we fail to prevent those who act for or on our behalf from criminally facilitating tax evasion. We already have a range of policies and procedures and guidance to underpin our financial activities, including the anti-money laundering policy and the counter-fraud strategy. This new policy has been developed specifically to address the prevention of tax evasion and is supplementary to the council's wider counter-fraud strategy that I've already mentioned. The recommendation to us is obviously slightly wrong, because originally this report was going to go to governance and audit before coming to us, but it's been decided it would make more sense if we actually approved the scheme first before it then went to governance and audit committee for them to implement the overview. So the actual recommendation to you is that Cabinet approves the anti-tax evasion policy as set out on pages 68 to 88 of our agenda for approval. And I move, Leader.
Okay, Brian, thank you very much. Councillor Gromley.
Thank you, Brian, for that report, and I am happy to second that recommendation.
Okay, any other members like to comment? I suspect we'd all concur with those sentiments that it's a necessary piece of legislation, something that we'll all be happy to support. So if there's no further comments, we've had a proposer and a second. Would members like to indicate they're in favour for going to audit for approval? Fantastic. So we'll move on to 9.2, which is revenue, business cases and budget reductions for the draft budget 22-23, and it's on pages 76 to 90. So back to Brian again.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Yeah, the budget for 2022-23, we did consider it at our meeting of the 25th of January, and I'm sure that you all recall that if all the business cases were supported, then we have a resource shortfall of 7.401 million. We need to meet this shortfall, as we discussed last time, with a combination of budget reductions or cuts, supporting fewer business cases and an increase in council tax. At our last meeting, we did agree to use £709,000 of reserves to fund 3 non-recurring business cases, which then reduces our shortfall to 6.692 million. We have, when it comes to business cases, we have all the business cases in Appendix 2, and some of those have presented an option B. If we agree to those option Bs, then that would reduce the cases by a further £785,000. Business case 27 addresses the significant pressure as a result of homelessness, with which members are quite familiar. Part of the business case allows for the prevention team to be strengthened, and the work of the team, along with other measures being taken, should in time reduce the homelessness emergency accommodation costs. Consequently, I would recommend to you that this budget is subject to regular review, and any other reductions in the need for this budget could then be returned to central resources. I know later on this report, Leader, we will, or Cabinet members will be taking us through some of the business cases within their portfolio areas. With regard to budget reductions, Table 2 within the report sets out the monetary value of differing levels of budget reductions so that members can appreciate what it would mean for services. I stress the fact I say monetary value because, of course, that's just the financial aspect. It's not the actual delivery of services that I'm taking into account. Members will recall that in accordance with the business planning framework, services were asked to consider budget reductions of up to 3%. Appendix 3 within our report details the specific budget reduction proposals, setting out which reductions will be made if the percentage of reductions are 1%, 2% or 3%. This year in particular, services have found it very difficult to identify budget reductions, with some not being able to identify recurring savings or the 3%. It's also the case that the proposals increasingly cut services, as we are all well aware. All service heads, as well as schools, have expressed their concerns to us all at the negative impact of further budget reductions. As a reminder to members, if you look at Table 3, it sets out the level of cuts faced by our services over the past decade, and it's perhaps of no surprise that services are increasingly cut to the bone. As set out in the January indicative budget report, the financial outlook for 2023-24 and beyond indicates that the Council will once again face considerable financial pressure, which will require services to find further significant budget reductions. I do recommend that some level of reductions do form part of our proposals for 2022-23, but not at the highest levels suggested. Turning specifically to schools, members in the past have often chosen to apply lower levels of budget reductions to schools, as we can see in the previous table. In planning this year, Cabinet have provided a strategic steer that all services, including schools, should plan on the same basis. This is in recognition that all services make an important and essential contribution to the Council as a whole, and that all services will be negatively impacted by further reductions. The risks that we find, they were included in the January indicative budget report, which we accepted, and they're reproduced again here in Appendix 4 for completeness and to act as a reminder of the potential in-year challenges we could face if any of these risks materialise. And a further risk has materialised today when we find that our insurance premiums will have a considerable increase over this coming 12 months. If we turn to council tax, you will recall that Welsh Government, in determining our AEF this year, have assumed that a council tax increase will be in the region of 3.49%. We're currently the 9th lowest council tax in Wales, and its Band D 2021-22 council tax is £1,383.50, which compares to the Welsh Government assumption of £1,403.57 and the Welsh average of £1,430.07. Table 4 within the report sets out the additional council tax that the council would raise if its council tax was set at these particular rates. It's also worth noting, something we do every year, but it is worth noting that our neighbouring authorities have higher council tax rates than we do. Gwyned's Band D stands at £1,483.23, which is some 7.2% higher. And Denbighshire's Band D stands at £1,436.76, which is some 3.85% higher. Clearly, in setting the council tax, we need to keep our residents in mind and the costs of living pressures that they face. However, that needs to be balanced against the detriment to services that will also impact on residents directly if council tax is set unduly low and budget reductions are set at the highest level. We have around 55,000 dwellings in the county of Conway subject to council tax. Around 21,000 of those are subject to a single person discount, and around 10,500 households are in receipt of and are supported by our council tax reduction scheme. From a budgetary perspective, it would be very much in the interest of the council to catch up over time the council tax to at least the standard spending council tax level, if not the Welsh option. The Welsh option. So we need to balance the remaining elements to address our resources shortfall by considering which revenue business cases we want to support, partially or in full, or reject, what level of budget reductions we want to apply across services, and what level of council tax increase will be applied to the 2021-2022 council tax. A combination, obviously, of these decisions needs to be made to address the resources shortfall in order that we can go to council with a budget in March 2022. So at this time, Leader, I would like to hand back to you so that the revenue business case options can be looked at by the various cabinet members.
Brian, thank you for taking us through that report and detailing some of the challenges we face. I think the issue about our council tax being historically lower than our neighbours, we say it every year, it's 3.85% lower than Denbighshire, it's 7.2% lower than Gwynedd. But if you look at that cumulative effect over 10 years, we have delivered our services for £50 million cheaper than Denbighshire and for £65 million cheaper than Gwynedd. We could also make the case if we charged the same rate, we would have had that in reserves, and then we would have been in a position where we could have delivered a very, very low rate of council tax and maintained services. But hindsight is a wonderful thing, and we are where we are, and it's up just to make decisions based on today. So it wasn't asked from scrutiny that we went and looked at the revenue cases. Obviously, this is something we've done from day one. Each portfolio holder is tasked with signing those off, so they have to spend time with their services, making sure it's essential. But we then have to come together as a collective and work out whether we can afford them all. It was always really important to me that we had good reasons for why we trimmed bits, that it's not just that simple /2% off up here, 3% here. So I'm really proud of the work my cabinet members have put in. In some cases, there's been pushback to suggested cuts. In other places, they've accepted them somewhat reluctantly, but that's the role we have as a cabinet. So just as a starting principle, there are some in there which will absolutely be delivered. So pay rises, the living wage, some stuff we should be really proud of, that will be spent in year, because we know it's just a question of, it's an administrative task essentially. But there are other stuff in here which is growth and aspirational, especially in terms of taking on new officers, new staff. We know that's challenging at the moment. So that the fundamental principle was to look at what we will, very similar to the capital business cases where they're scored on whether they're deliverable. So we've taken out the ones that we know we'll be signing checks for. And then we've looked at the other ones and seen whether we can save a bit of money there by essentially that been rolled over into the next financial year, the year after. So I'd just like sort of cabinet members perhaps to give a little feel for the challenges they've faced and the decisions they've made and why we've done that. So if anybody, Louise, you had your hand up, if you'd like to talk us through what you've had to do.
Thank you, Leader. And yes, I'll start that conversation, which indeed we've been having over the last few weeks. In fact, I think it was about November time where these conversations were happening between us, and our services put in their revenue business cases. And indeed, all of them are justified on their own, but there is a collective responsibility to balance the budget. And I'm acutely aware myself and Cheryl, when we look at the social services asks, they're always one of the biggest budgets, and they're also one of the biggest asks. And when we talk about a growth in demand, it's not something that's relatively positive in some ways, because it means that there's more people, more residents needing more care, whether that's in their old age or particularly after they've had an unfortunate accident or a health concern. And then of course over into children's services as well. We look after our looked after children cohorts, need supporting right through into adult life. So it's a really important part of what we do, and therefore of course we go through the revenue business cases, we throw them into the pot. The biggest chunk of the business case is the national living wages, the care fees. That's one which there's no discussion on. So that gets signed off, really, that's going to happen. And then the next one is the shortfall of funding in adult services going forward. And we looked at those in detail. That basically is asking for more jobs, essentially, more people to come and become social workers, care workers, help behind the scenes in the business transformation and the business services. And we've looked at those in detail, and we've looked at the children's and family safeguarding business revenue case as well. And we feel that we can take a sum of £300,000 off those combined services. So having spoken to the head of social services, Jenny Williams, she's asked us not for cabinet to tie her into removing that from one of the business cases, that to just say that the ask of social services, which was 1.639 for adults and 776,000 for children, is that we're asking her to reduce that ask by £300,000, and that they decide where that falls. And of course, this is also in connection with the budget reductions, which we're going to come on in a minute. So the business revenue case is the ask for the business support, also is combined with the business reductions we're asking them to do, and we'll talk about that later. So I'm happy to put that forward. I think that is part of the collective responsibility. Going on to my other portfolio, much less money, but I'm still as passionate about it, which is within leisure. And we have asked leisure under its new management to become more commercial, and we'll see in the budget reductions how that has absolutely helped. We've asked them to make the service essentially make money and be viable at the same time as providing reasonable rates to go swimming, to use the gym, etc., etc. So we've done all the rebranding, we've invested in the equipment. It's now a pretty cool place to go, the council gym, I have to say. And one of the things we're not very good at is picking the phone up. And that's where the contact centre comes in. A shocking amount of phone calls are missed. So when you're ringing up to book your children's party at the gym or organise a badminton session, whatever it is, you don't answer the phone. No one answers the phone and deals with it. That's no good. We've now got an app. We've now got a way of booking stuff where you don't have to speak to a human being, but we still miss a lot of calls. And the contact centre is employing staff in order to answer the phones and have a much more efficient system. The ask was 180,000. I have reduced that to 130,000, spoken to the staff, the management, and they feel they can provide that service and they can achieve basically a much higher level of income. It's almost a spend to save. And in the future, it means that this service can be sustainable. So those are the two things in the business revenue cases, which I'm happy to put forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Louise. Councillor Gregg.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Obviously, within ERF, we've had some of the major cuts over the years, and certainly the biggest cuts in cash real terms. And obviously, we're still faced with challenges moving forward. One of the business cases brought forward this year is Glasdeer, because obviously that's come back into the council's ownership and operation, although we now have a library operating in that. The actual cost of running that building totally is £109,000 a year. The business case was written on that basis, but having discussed this with the various partners involved in this, we think we can reduce that down to 55,000, with the rest being made up from other users of the building over the forthcoming period. So effectively that they'll be subsidising the cost, which I think is only fair and reasonable. So I'm quite happy to reduce that case down. With regard to street cleansing, obviously in the last year we saw the most phenomenal rise in staycations, massive amounts of visitors right the way throughout all of Conway County. To give you a steer on this, our average summer weekend collection from waste bins is 6 tonnes. It went between 17 and 20 tonnes on even one occasion on one weekend during last summer. And obviously this has a cost. We need to get more people out there. We need to empty bins more often. The actual cost last year was 287,000, and that was actually paid for through the recovery fund from Welsh Government, the COVID recovery fund. That fund won't exist this year. We are still expecting, in fact, even a report on Carrot again today, staycation boom across all of Wales, and we believe Conway County is going to be one of the peak areas to have this as well, which is great for our businesses based in tourism, people working in tourism. However, that means we still have this potential that we don't, our standard cyclic cleaning as we had for emptying, street cleaning, emptying bins wouldn't work. Now, we did make capital investment and we put in much larger bins in a lot of locations and still a few more to go in. So therefore, having looked at this, I'm happy to reduce that business case down to 180,000. But I can't realistically, hand on heart, take it any lower than that, because otherwise we won't be able to provide the services that our communities actually need on that. The next one I've got in there is the mobile household waste recycling centres, and having looked at that, it's the case if we made any reductions on that, it's for rural areas, it really wouldn't be feasible to run the service, so we've had to leave that one alone. And my final revenue business case is 175,000, and that is purely and simply for the increased cost of vehicle operations for fuel and tyres across the entire council, not just in my portfolio. It covers all vehicles. And given the comments we've seen about inflation, comments from Councillor Bryan about insurances going up, it would be very prudent to fund this because we know this is going to happen. But having said that, we've identified £162,000 worth of savings out of our original 606,000 requests in revenue cases.
Thank you very much, Greg. We know inflation's at 5.4%, estimated to go to 7% in spring, so that will have a massive effect on our budgets as well as sadly on many of our residents who don't have inflation-linked pensions, etc. Councillor Grumley.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. And as you said, this has been quite a long process. We haven't just come up with these figures overnight. We started back in the end of last year looking at what could be our amount of spend. We then thought we'd probably be receiving a settlement of around 5%, and we asked our services to look for savings of around 3%. those services went away and came back with some very hard choices that we looked at. And fortunately, when the settlement came, we were in a slightly better position with having over 9%, which is a one-off increase. We have to remember that next year we will be back in the same sort of position, looking at severe budget pressures. So we went to our offices. Our homeless, which is already referred to by Councillor Bryan and referred to yesterday by Amanda in the scrutiny committee, had put a business case into to try and tackle the massive demand we've had over this period. COVID has certainly made a difference in the people coming forward, presenting themselves homeless. This was a massive challenge. I don't see that challenging ending anytime soon. The point that Greg made about the attractiveness of Conway to come and stay on location and holidays means that there's less rented accommodation available for our homeless teams. So we do look at how we can try and mitigate that by having a prevention team. Now, they looked again at that, and I think the reasons that Brian gave and Amanda explains how we're going to try and tackle that with that, while still protecting that service. The other service business case we put in was in the public section, in the public protection department. We had cases in there for around 300,000. We went back and revisited this, and if you look at the structure there, we were proposing to enhance that team because the pressure on public protection has certainly been increasing because of COVID as well, looking at all the work we have to do around the public protection elements, which include health, hygiene, public safety, licensing, all the things that our residents are deeply concerned that we maintain those services. They had been cut over many years. So that a business case was put forward. I've managed to reduce that by around 50,000 by taking one post out of there, which was a full-time environmental health officer at a grade of around GO9. So that's roughly equates to around 50 to 55,000 pounds saving. The IT business case in there is one that is a no-brainer. We have to replace our IT system. The contract is coming to an end, so that remains as it was. So those are the savings we are putting forward. I know it was raised yesterday in scrutiny. If we'd identified bigger savings, why aren't we pushing those forward to our residents? But it did come at a significant cost to our service delivery and to our stability going forward. So I'm comfortable that we've come to a compromise in our deliberations as a cabinet and looking to achieve somewhere around 1.5% savings, at the same time delivering a reduced council tax, because initially we were looking at maybe near 4.9 to 5%, and we're now looking at probably a reduced rate somewhere around 3.95. And I thank Peter yesterday in scrutiny for putting that recommendation forward of around 1.5% savings and the council tax of around 3.5, which I'm comfortable.
Thank you, Gromway. I think you're absolutely right. It's been absolutely clear during COVID that those smaller backroom teams who've been pared to the bone have kept us safe, our environmental health officers and all our IT, and that's the fundamental reason behind the approach we've taken, that every little cog plays its part, and without that we would not have kept people safe as a council. And our public do want better environment health, better enforcement. Let's not forget the positives here. A lot of this spend will give us an opportunity to really deliver services that we've not been as good at because our focus has had to be elsewhere. So there are lots of positives here as well. Councillor Chris and then Councillor Julie.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you for those words in support of the smaller teams that comprise a lot of our essential council work. My portfolio has quite a few of these, and I want to defend in full the procurement remodelling. We've only got one full-time procurement officer who's working with social care and housing, and then 2 part-timers. The case for remodelling is to bring a full-timer in with experience and suitably qualified to support us in producing our net carbon zero work and supporting the local economy and so on with procurement. So that I'd like untouched. Similarly, and I'm sure Councillor Julie will support me in this, we need to put that 30,000 for legal support for the ALN Act. We know that we need to defend tribunal cases in appropriate manner, and we need to have the internal expertise to do that. So that I'd like unchanged. However, on the paralegal business case, we've thought long and hard about this, and Reen, the head of law and governance, has gone away and talked to the legal team concerned. This is only a small team and they need their paralegals. But what we think we could do is to reduce the second paralegal to 4 days a week, increase some income and use some reserves, and therefore down to 49,500. So I know that's not a big saving, but for a small team, 16,500 is a large ask, and we think we can do it. So that's what I would like to put in the pot today from my side.
Thank you, Conor. Chris, Councillor Julie.
Thank you, Leader. Yes. So obviously this has been going on for a long time, and I think that's come through today, and I think it should come through that we've been working, certainly as cabinet members, with our heads of service. We have then worked, I know certainly I have, in the education portfolio, worked with the social care portfolio holders and strategic directors and heads of service to look at this for a long time. So even what sits in front of us today and some of the tweaks and changes we're making today, you know, we've already made an awful lot of tweaks and changes to this for a number of months. So yeah, I just want to be clear the amount of work that goes in, and gosh, my massive thanks to the team and officers that work so hard on this. So in terms of where we're at with the education, let me just bring up. So in terms of the revenue business cases, as you'll see in the report, we have a number in there. In terms of the changes, so there's two that we're looking at in terms of reducing. So the site management team restructure, it's not ideal to reduce this. However, we have got a new team in place. So this is around the 21st Century Schools project. So the team that we have in place will allow us to continue to move forward and enable us to move forward with the new Band B of the 21st Century Schools. But reducing this the way that we are does mean that there is a risk that we wouldn't be able to meet all of the demands of the Band B. There is a risk, which I do need to highlight, that we could have to return some of the money if we struggle with capacity. But certainly we can look at that as we move forward, and that's the reduction that we're making today to the revenue business case that come in. But the good part of this is that we do have a team of 4 officers. This is one that will be down then by reducing and going for option B. So it will still be achievable, and the new staff that we have, the team that we have in place, are working incredibly well. So that's positive. And then the other one is the early years funding. So Welsh Government put something in place where they wanted us to work towards a certain amount per child. This just means that it will take us longer really to get to that point. If we go for option B here, it just means that instead of paying £450 per child, that we'll do that over the space of a couple of years and work our way up to that. But there are things in place to support settings. There's opportunities for them to apply for additional funding to support them. This is just to ensure that we've got enough places for our early years provision. So the reduction means that it just takes us a little longer to get to where Welsh Government wants us to be. So I'm happy to support that. And then in terms of the rest of the revenue business cases, I know we've discussed it numerous times, that this is all positive. I mean, a lot of them are beyond our control really to change. The additional learning needs transformation, that's because we looked at what we needed in order to support the changes in the new ALN Act and the extra staffing that was part of that. And again, with the additional learning need provision for autism neurodevelopmental, that was recognised that we needed extra support in that area. Early years, I've touched on free school meals. That is because of the increased uptake over the last couple of years, really, with COVID. Increased pupil numbers at Gogath. Again, this is something that's been looked at in a number of different ways, but this is about supporting the additional places that we have there currently. And the funding, Ysgol Gogath funding, year 2 of 2, it was something we discussed last year. That was just to bring us up to the Welsh average for funding of special schools. Homeschool transport, basically that we've discussed that before, that's somewhat beyond our control, and I agree with Chris, the £30,000 funding for the additional legal support that we expect will be needed as part of the ALN Act is definitely very needed. And then school increased pupil numbers, that's just to support schools in the difference between the additional pupil numbers that we weren't expecting, really. And then just more generally in terms of where we're at, it's hard, isn't it? Because we want to fight for our areas, we want to fight for schools, for education, but we have to see the bigger picture, and we have to come up with something that seems measured and fair. And I think that's what we've been working towards over the last few weeks and months. I know we're hearing about the cost of living increases. It's incredibly difficult, but it's kind of a choice to try and protect services as much as we can now, because actually the likelihood is people are going to need them more than they ever have done before. So whilst I know for people out there, they might think a council tax increase of 3.95% seems high when they have everything else to pay, we're just trying to be sensible and measured and protect the services that they may need to support them moving forward. So I'm happy to support that. In terms of budget savings for our services, I think 1.5% is fair. I know that schools will certainly say that they would like it to be the same as last year at 0%, but what we are doing is we're covering a 4%, or that's what we've made provision for within the budget, a 4% pay rise to school staff, to teachers, which I think is really fair. I'm happy to support that we do that. I think, teachers we've seen over the last 2 years have worked incredibly hard. So supporting them getting that pay increase, I think will hopefully encourage more into education, into schools and teaching, and hopefully allow us to keep some of the amazing staff that we've got there that might otherwise have thought about finding an alternative profession. But yeah, I think it's fair. I think what we've done is measured, it's fair, and hopefully it addresses things from all angles. So I'm happy to support that. Thank you, Leader.
Okay, then Councillor Mark.
Thank you very much, Leader. From my portfolio perspective, which is part of the economy and culture portfolio that I share with Councillor Louise, we cover libraries, theatres, archives. We have 2 revenue business cases in the offing. The first one is looking at reinstating the premises budget for Colwyn Bay Library. During the pandemic, most buildings were closed. We've been reopening them up. Colwyn Bay is one of the largest, and we need to reinstate the budget for that. So that's 39,000 that we've put in. And then the other item is really developing the next steps for the cultural strategy, which is Craig Conway, which is about 63,000 a year. And culture has really kind of shown that it is the engine and the catalyst for regeneration. And in terms of moving forward out of the pandemic, we see economic growth, wellbeing and connections coming from the framework that we've developed in the cultural strategy, and particularly with the delivery phase of the drawing down of the UK community renewal funding. That's an essential thing that we are doing as part of the outreach and the outputs of the cultural strategy. So with 1.5 savings within the departments, we feel that's achievable, and we can continue to deliver for our residents. So happy to put those forward. Thank you.
Cynhora Emma, please.
Diolch Arweinydd. Looking at what everybody's been saying thus far, and it's obvious that we've walked a long, hard road, so to speak, and it's probably something that many members won't be aware of, those things that go on in the background by virtue of the fact that we hold these portfolios. With regards to the revenue cases, you'll be aware that there was one in from my portfolio, that being the corporate health and safety, £25,000, which compared to some of them isn't actually that much. I just want to add that. Of course, the issue with regards to corporate health and safety is that £25,000 essentially allows them to meet their budget requirement. The fact that the core funding for corporate health and safety isn't enough, essentially. So that extra 19,000 within that 25,000 is to cover the costs of essentially the courses that they've not been able to run during COVID. That's where they get a lot of addition to that budget, and 6,000 would be to support the hours of a current member of staff. Now, I didn't have an option B within my portfolio there, so I noticed that numerous members around this virtual table have had those option Bs, but there was not one from mine with just that 25 grand required. We have had conversations, obviously, as cabinet with regards to actually how we fund this whole essentially within our budget, and I do understand that corporate health and safety going down to that 13,000 for that revenue case. It is something that we have been looking at. Wouldn't be overly happy, might have to run away from Richard at high speed, but I think I can probably run faster than he can. So I just put that out there. With regards to the service cuts, then as fairly small services, I suppose, in a budgetary sense, I'm thinking of IT, thinking of HR, which encompasses corporate health and safety. Then going to a 3% cut in our services would be very difficult to deliver. Many of our services are cut to the core, having had budgetary cuts over numerous years, and that's where my services would be. So fine, 1.5% cut, we understand that, and we can make it work, but looking at anything really over that then starts to become very, very difficult for these small services that both Councillor Chris and I hold as portfolio holders. It becomes a large part of our budget when you're talking about percentages, essentially. So just putting that out there, and I will now mute myself for everyone's benefit.
Okay, Councillor Brown.
Yeah, thanks, Leader. I hope that those listening have listened carefully to the cabinet members, because what we're trying to do is to follow the recommendations to us from the Finance and Resources Committee of yesterday, where their first proposal was that the viability of budget reduction proposals be considered. Oh no, sorry. The first one was that all revenue business cases options be considered and that business cases be scaled back wherever possible. And I hope that that we have actually achieved that, and that other members can see that it's not just a knee-jerk reaction from us. This is something that we've been considering for a considerable amount of time, and the budget reductions that we've come to, the new business cases that we've pared back. We hope that that members will be able to see the sense behind those, and that gives us a reduction in the revenue business cases of 1.325 million. We didn't consider that any of the option B cases that had been put forward meant that that particular business case would then be viable. We felt it was far more sensible to go for the larger business case, and then in some cases pare those back to a more reasonable figure. With regard to the budget reduction proposals, Finance and Resources suggested to us that the reduction proposals be considered with the view of setting reductions at no more than 2% where possible. Well, you've heard from some of my colleagues that again, it's something that we considered very carefully, because our hope is that we can have reductions, but that the services will continue to be able to provide that face-to-face service that our residents require. There's no point in, well, you can look at Appendix 4, you can look at the column of 3%, and yes, it could well be that the services will be able to find those cuts of 3%, but at what cost to the actual service being provided? We see next year as being a considerably difficult year again for our services. There will be lots of calls on those face-to-face services that we provide, and we are of the opinion that the budget reductions should be at the sum of 1.5%, not only within the council but also for schools. And we think that is a viable option for everyone to achieve without cutting services. They then asked that an indicative council tax increase be determined by the level of agreed budget reductions and possible scale back business cases. Again, we've been looking at this for a considerable number of weeks and months. So again, we think it is prudent as a cabinet to have our council tax level at 3.95%. This will ensure that, again, that services continue to be able to offer their services in full to members of the public. We're also very cognizant of the fact that we, for once, have been given 3-year indicative budgets, and we know that the following year and the year after we will be back to the normal percentage increases in our AEF, and we think it's prudent to set the level there, and hopefully that will be acceptable to full council. And as you know, it's all right, I'm just reading something which I couldn't bring into focus. Yep. So we believe that 3.95% will give us a balanced budget, which will then take us forward quite neatly into the following 2 years. And their final recommendation was with regard to homelessness, which I think we would all agree that is a flexible budget, which we hope will improve as the year goes on. And therefore, if necessary, if there is spare capacity within that budget to bring back to the centre then that's what we should do as the year progresses, rather than wait for the end of the year. So how it looks, as I say, we our 3.95% council tax rise should bring us in 2.344 million. We've already agreed to use 709,000 for reserves. At 1.5, we should have budget reductions of 3.023, and the rejected business cases, as I say, should bring 1.325, which then brings us to the 7.4 million that we were looking for at the beginning of the process, which is, I think Councillor Julie said, we started in November. So we do have a balanced budget. We think it's right for our residents. We think it's right for our staff. And we think it's right for the considerable pressures that the council and our residents will come under over the next 12 months. It is a fair, balanced budget. So I would move those recommendations, Leader.
Hey, Brian, thank you very much once again. I, as leader, would be delighted is too strong a word. I'll be proud to second that. I think the work that you guys have done, you've taken a lot of pushing and prodding from me, defending your services where you had to, which is absolutely the right thing to do. We've had to make some difficult choices along the way. I, as leader, will take full responsibility for those choices ultimately, because there is risk there. As I think Julie commented, it's our poorest in society who need our services most, but also, and I think it's really important that we highlight this, you can make cuts in this year, but it will cost you more money in the next year and the year after and the year after. If we don't repair our young people, if we don't keep them with their families, we do the adaptations to people's houses to keep them in their houses as they grow older, if we don't provide adequate domiciliary care, these people will end up in care homes. It's no good for them, and it'll cost more money fundamentally down the line. It's that old adage, if you don't fix the tile on the roof, it'll cost you a lot more in a year or two. And we're at that situation where this is a prudent, sensible, balanced budget. You will always find lines that you don't like and bits to pick holes in. But we have done, I think, absolutely the best we can. And I'll take full responsibility for it. I'm quite happy to make my case to my residents. We know there's an election year coming. People will campaign for it being much lower, but I can hold my head up and say I've done the best, and you guys have done too. So very, very happy to second it. But again, it is an indicative budget. A few things can change between now and council in terms of extra funding or extra pressures. So this is where we're at the moment. It's important to realise there may well be some changes, and this will be our recommendation at them. All right, so Councillor Grumley.
Thank you, Leader. You've taken the words out of my mouth. I was going to second Brian's proposal. We've already done that. I'd just like to add that I'd like to thank Amanda in particular. You know, this is her first portfolio in the first budget, I should say, in post. So thank her for all the work and support she's offered to our heads of service in bringing those amendments forward and trying to revisit savings wherever we can. So thank Amanda and the team for that as well. So thank you.
Okay. So is any other members want to comment on that? Louise. Louise.
Yes, and I think talking about the budget cuts, and we were asked yesterday by scrutiny to ensure that we originally asked for 3% and to ensure whether that could still be achieved in some services. And I am, again, like you, Charlie, happy to know that discussion has happened, and particularly in one of the biggest budgets, my budget, in social services, if you look at the Appendix 3, where it looks at what would entail a 3% cut, some of those are completely unpalatable, not just to me personally, but I would hope to all 59 members. Officers have to put them forward. And there's ones they have put forward, such as a set of savings in travel costs, such as more people taking up direct payments, which is a saving actually, and at the same time quite a positive for the families and looking after their loved ones. So I am confident that the savings that we've asked social services to find, 1.5%, will be met. There will be some difficult decisions ahead over the next financial year, but I'm confident that they can meet those. And talking about previously about the economy and culture section, is we've asked them to become more commercial. We've asked them to find out sponsorship deals and to make leisure more commercial, in order that when it comes to this moment and they have to contribute to the savings, they can do that. And I think that's a real success story. So yes, I think there are other pots of money floating around, but I think we've got a general principle now of what we're going to present to full council. It may yet change a little bit. You never know with these last few weeks to go, but I'm happy to support that as long as everything adds up, which I'm sure it does.
Yeah, no, thanks, Louise. And I think one point we should highlight is councils for years have asked government to give us indicative budgets for 3 years. Now, we've been told this year, because of the pandemic, we've had a large increase, and a large increase. So prudent about that as well, going to surge money in year 1 and then realizing that you're a bit short in year 2, year 3, because this is what we've asked for, and we are planning ahead for us leading this council and executive next year. That's what we're going to do, is being sensible and prudent, not for ourselves, but to make sure our residents are in a good position in the future years to come. Councillor Gregg.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to partially echo what Louise has said, because obviously to get to 3%, to be honest, even to get to 2%, our services have to start stopping services, including reducing number of public toilets, which obviously isn't acceptable. That's one thing during the pandemic, massive use of them. As soon as we got them back to full strength, continuous usage, and it's something we need to propagate forward as the service that both tourists and residents need. So I'm glad we've reached this decision this afternoon, because there's no way I could support anything that reduces services which our residents actually need.
Okay, thanks everybody. So I think we're in agreement as to where we want to be. Can I ask Breen, do we need the recommendations? Do we need to vote together, or how do we have to proceed?
I think, Leader, that we'd be in a position to take them all together. I don't see any issue that we need to take them apart. So if you can take them, the proposal is the whole, isn't it? So yes, you can take one vote on the whole, I think.
Okay, so that's been by Councillor Brand. Has been show of favour, please. Okay, thank you very much. I've had the dreaded internet issue, so I'm just going to switch my video off. Can I just check everyone can hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah. Thank you. All right, so we move back on to the agenda. We're on to agenda item 9.3, which is the draft capital programme, and that's on pages 91 to 101. Again, it's back to Brian for that.
Yeah, just before I start this one, I'd like to thank Amanda for all the hard work that she's done on the programme that we've just approved. Because as Greg, as Garonwy said, it's first budget, and it's a most difficult year to be doing it in. So it's quite a baptism of fire for her. But thank you, Amanda, for all the work from you and your staff on that particular budget. And then we move on to the draft capital programme, which hopefully will be a little easier to swallow. Because this report includes in the Appendix 1 that we have details of our draft capital programme for 2022-23, following the announcement of the local government settlement in December. The information in Appendix 1, together with supporting appendices, includes the detailed capital business cases, and they're included for us to consider. As we are well aware, we can choose to enhance the capital programme by funding business cases through unsupported borrowing, and this allows for an enhanced capital programme which could support priorities within the corporate plan. However, approving these additional schemes does put pressure on the revenue business cases in future years, and therefore we need to consider everything in the context of affordability. I just there wouldn't move. The capital governance framework, which we're all well aware, was formally adopted by Council in 2017 when we had the capital selection process to aid the prioritisation. This year, the capital selection group met on the 6th of December to score the business cases, where the panel dealt with it as in previous years, where it comprised of 4 different groups looking at 4 different criteria to award points. The capital business cases submitted for next year totaled 39.051 million, which is Appendix 2 within the report, of which 22.176 million would require funding, with the majority of the balance being funded from external grants. The business cases as listed in Appendix 2 are listed in a ranked order, highest to lowest, of the scores awarded by the capital selection panel. It's important to note that by supporting some business cases, we will attract significant grant funding, and it's also, so it makes good financial sense to support those cases, provided they deliver schemes that contribute to our corporate priorities, of course. In particular, we need to be aware of business case 6, the match funding for the UK Levelling Up Fund grant applications. Over the coming months, the Council will have the opportunity to submit 3 applications, as we know, for funding from the UK Levelling Up grant scheme, one for the Aberconway constituency, a joint bid with Denbighshire relating to Clwyd West, and a transport bid for the county. The total value of these schemes, if successful, would be £50 million, of which we would need to fund 10%, which is some £5 million. The profile of the capital spend that would be over a period of 3 years, with £1.5 million being required next year. But by supporting that case for next year, we are in effect approving the scheme for the following 2 years as well, which but I think we've already discussed this, and we're quite happy to do that. Future years commitment, although a number of the cases set out potential capital costs over a number of years, we're still able to consider the case on a year-by-year basis, i.e. activity in 2022-23 does not create an automatic commitment in future years, even though ongoing activity may be preferable. Yeah, right. So I've just lost my place in my notes. However, as I said, there are 4 cases where it's not the case, and if the cases are supported in the coming year, it does create an obligation. As I've already mentioned, there's the UK Levelling Up Fund grant. There will be the Goved Bulking Station, the fire prevention and mitigation, the safeguarding the integrity of our coastal defences at Happy Valley, and the Dinneth Road development. So approval of those 4 schemes in the coming year will in effect approve the remainder of those schemes in subsequent years, which I say I think we are all content with. We've already discussed and looked at those. In addition to the general capital grant and borrowing, the council can fund its capital activity from capital reserves or the capital grants reserves in order to extend the number of schemes that we have. We do have some money in reserves, but the bulk of those funds are already earmarked. However, in particular, it's proposed that part of business case 4, the corporate event strategy, and business case 22, the feasibility study for the Rows-on-Sea kiosks, are funded from capital receipts, and that is affordable, which obviously is the most important part. And except for business case 1, it would not be appropriate to use revenue reserves to support the capital programme. I think we're all well aware of that, but it's something that I must mention. So apart from the cases in paragraph 410 and 416 of the report, the capital programme will need to be funded by the general capital grant and the borrowing that we shall make. The suggested capital programme, which you see before us, would result in borrowing costs of some 660,000, increasing the unavoidable capital financing costs that we have within our revenue budget of 3.191 million. In the case of business case number 26, which is the Watling Street car park improvements, it's proposed that those financing costs relating to £75,000, or 50% of this case, will be met by the service revenue budget, that is car parking income. Preferably, in terms of affordability, the capital programme would be set at around the £12 million level or even lower, which would limit the additional borrowing costs to around £500,000 and require less unsupported borrowing. And that's something that we will need to consider in future years. However, for 2022-23, given the scale and importance of the capital schemes that we have within our lists, that wouldn't be achievable at this time. So, Leader, under 5.4 on page 114, I would like to move that we accept option 1 with regard to the capital business cases, that we approve all the capital business cases with future revenue budget costs of 991,000 per annum from 2023-24, and note the full value of this programme, including grants and other funding, is 39.051 million. And I would move that as our capital programme for the next financial year. Some very, very exciting schemes in there, despite the revenue pressures that we are under. We have exciting schemes in there to improve our economy and improve the place where our residents live. So I move that, Mr. Leader.
Thank you very much, Brian. I'd like to add my thanks to Amanda, especially the capital cases. The way she wrote the report really laid out the sort of advantages, the risks, the costs, essentially. But you're absolutely right. There's some really exciting stuff in there. Conway's got a really proud tradition of attracting external funding, whether it be European Union money or Welsh money or UK government money. 50 million can be transformational for our economy. So really supportive of getting that money in and spending it on the infrastructure and economy and business. So without any comment, we've had a proposal from Councillor Bryan for this. No? Yeah, do you want to second it, Gromley?
Yep. Happy to second that.
Okay, so I think we're all in agreement. Members, if there's no more comments, can we all vote, indicate we're happy with that? Brilliant. Once again, thanks, Brian. Some really detailed and lengthy reports.
Yeah, and once again, I'd like to thank Amanda and the finance staff for the capital business report.
Yeah, I'm sure we'd all agree with that. So that's, you can have a bit of a rest now, Brian. Agenda item 10 is exempt items. Local Government Act Section 100A and Section 12A access to information. To consider passing resolution under the provisions of Section 100A4 of the above act to exclude the public and the press from the in consideration of the following items, as it is would be disclosure of the information as defined in paragraphs 14, 15, and 16 of Part 4 of the 1972.
You're starting to break up again, Leader.
Okay, I hope you got enough of that to vote to approve to move into private session.
Yep.
So we all just vote in favour of that, please, and then Shan, if you can let me know when